decided to give you some quite embarrassing but rather inside information into my personal life. I own a onesie. Several years ago I got quite unwell with a really nasty cold, and I decided to treat myself to one of these really snuggly soft onesies. So I have a onesie and I do wear it. I'm not going to do a fashion show now. However, when I came home today from a very cold day and a long day, I immediately wanted to slip into my warm and cozy and snuggly onesie. And I did that, and I realized that I was going to do this recording. So I just thought, all I thought about as soon as I entered was my own comfort. There is a woman in the Bible who hardly ever thought about her own comfort, but she always deemed the person she loved as being more important than herself, and she always wanted to do what was best for her and thought of her well-being. And this woman's name is Ruth. Now we're going to be in the coming few weeks thinking about and reflecting on some aspects of the book of Ruth. If you are intending to listen to these sessions on a regular basis, particularly to do with the book of Ruth, you might like to read it before you listen to the videos. So the book of Ruth is sandwiched between the book of Judges and 1 Samuel in the Old Testament. And the previous book, which is the book of Judges, finishes with the verse that says, "In those days Israel had no king, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes." In those days Israel had no king, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Because there was no king, nobody actually in power who was recognized to bring the rules to the country, the nation was actually very unruly. Everyone did whatever they pleased to do. Interestingly, after Judges, the book of Ruth starts, and it starts with everyone's names, and it goes, and the man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. In those days, names were really, really important. They were almost prophetically chosen to define the character of people. Naomi's name meant the pleasant one. Her husband Elimelech's name meant God is my king. In a land where nobody acknowledged an authority, in a land when there was no king, this man Elimelech's name meant God is my king. He followed God. He was a righteous man. And interestingly, the book starts saying Elimelech, his name is God is my king. And then this family that the book of Ruth starts telling about is struck by tragedy. Elimelech dies. Naomi is left with her 2 sons and their wives. The 2 sons of Elimelech and Naomi had married 2 Moabite women. Notice that the women from Moab actually did not have a very good reputation. Israelites were not meant to intermarry anybody from Moab. They were not looked at with respect. They were kind of rejected within the society. And then Naomi's 2 sons die as well. So Naomi is left, this is in the first chapter, Naomi is left with her two daughters-in-law. She decides to try and convince them to go back to their own families, because that way at least their parents and their families would feed them. There is famine in the land. They are very poor. Men look after women, and they have nobody. Her sons are gone, her husband is gone, so she tells her daughters-in-law to go back to their homeland, where they will be looked after. Oprah goes back to her family, but Ruth, the other daughter-in-law, decides to follow Naomi. And she says to Naomi, "Your God will be my God." Now, even though she is from Moab, even though she doesn't, by upbringing, follow God, she has become a part of the family. We don't know whether she has chosen to become a Jew before she marries Naomi and Elimelech's son. What we do know is that despite her background, despite being somebody who is not respected amongst the Israelites, she decides to follow Naomi, her mother-in-law, knowing that life is going to be tough. At this time there is a famine in Moab, and so Ruth and Naomi decide to travel to Bethlehem because of this famine, and because they've also heard that in Judah God's people are provided for. So they travel together to Bethlehem, and it is barley harvest time, and there's a little bit of hope that they might be able to feed themselves and look after themselves. And in this non-earth-shaking story, this very simple Moabitess, Ruth, by being faithful to her mother-in-law, showing kindness to her by following God, by following Naomi, she finds that things unfold in her life like she hasn't really dreamt of before. In this non-earth-shaking story, Ruth is actually, through her faithfulness and kindness, even though she goes through quite a lot of trouble, in the end finds God's faithfulness and God's face shine upon her. And we understand from this story that actually things that are not so important maybe to us, people who are not so important, maybe even despised and rejected, are ever so important to God. And therefore we find hope that we are important to God. However unimportant we might feel, there is a name that's been given to us by God. We have been chosen to be His children. He has chosen us to be faithful to Him as He continues to be faithful to us. And sometimes it's quite difficult to believe in the faithfulness of God. We struggle to trust in the faithfulness of God, maybe because we have witnessed the unfairness of life and the difficulties of life, and maybe we've even ourselves been struck by a tragedy like Naomi and Ruth were. But God is a God who's able to use a simple woman from Moab and shine His face on her. Our God is not going to let us down. May you find His faithfulness in your lives.